Hello, today I'd like to tell you a bit about this Ibanez Musician 550 series. It was my very first electric guitar, and through the years I discovered that it actually had been an excellent first choice as well. I already thought it was good then, but I only learned how good it exactly was when I got to play several other quality guitars. This is a 1981 guitar. You can tell from the serial number. Its first two digits indicate the year of its fabrication, which was 1981. These were one of the, not the, but one of the first models after Ibanez was threatened with a lawsuit by Gibson because of its, they're very exact copies of Gibson and quite good quality ones at that. And so they started making their own models. There were a couple of models before this, the Studio amongst others. But pretty soon they arrived at this model, which actually isn't unique either, because you can find quite similarly looking guitars by Roland, which used it for its guitar synthesizers, and also Alembic made guitars that were quite close to this design. So I don't know who actually originally came up with this model. The Roland ones you could see being played by Al Di Meola or Pat Metheny. This one was played for a while by Daryl Stuermer, Genesis Live guitarist. I bought it new in 1983 for 1,300 guilders, which would translate to about $600 then. So not really cheap guitar. Nowadays they will fetch between $1,000 and $1,500 on eBay, sometimes even more. Although I think that's actually a bit exaggerated. But then again, if you really want one of these guitars, they are very fine, nice quality guitars. I learned almost everything on it when it comes to playing electric guitar. One of the few things I didn't like about it already quite quickly were its pickups, and these aren't the original ones. This is one of the original ones that was on it, the Super 88s, and the main problem they had, I found, was microphonic feedback. So not your nice feeding back guitar that you know from heavy metal or hard rock, but no, like the squeal, the high squeal you get through a microphone when playing with overdriven sounds at high volumes. That led to some embarrassing situations on stage. So I decided to replace them with these EMGs. They sound a bit brighter. That was another problem I had a bit with those elements, with those pickups. They neither sounded very bright or very warm, and these have a clearer definition, I think. Coincidentally, they also look a bit better. That black plastic matches nicely with the black ebony fingerboard, I think. So that's a modification I made after some 10 years, a bit more, 15 years or something. Another slide, well, it's not a modification, but I replaced tuning machines after some 25 years because they had worn out the original valve tuning machines. They were quite good, but yeah, apparently after 25 years that was a bit much. So I replaced them with shallows, which look quite similar actually. It doesn't change that much on the design. Specialists will note that this Truss Rod cover has been replaced too. I got it without one. This guitar had been stolen out of the store I bought it from and had been away from a couple of months. When they found it back, I did get it 100 guilders cheaper, $50 cheaper because of that. Only I had to put on a Truss Rod cover myself. When it comes to materials, what kinds of woods are being used in this guitar? Its original brochure is a bit confusing, but I think eventually I could conclude that this center is made of maple, and these sandwich slabs of wood that are around it are made of ash, which would explain that it's quite a heavy guitar. It weighs about 12 pounds and you feel that. The neck, it's a through neck, as you can see. Nowadays mostly used on basses, but especially in the 1980s you would see it on several high quality guitars. It's also mainly maple with layers of some other wood in between. It's got 7 layers in total. I don't know what the other wood is here actually. Well, it's got your yeah, kind of Gibson style tunematic bridge here, very solidly built. It's got a little piece of brass here next to the top nut, which improves its already quite impressive sustain. An ebony fingerboard, as I said before. And then the electronics are quite special, especially on this 550 model. It was also incorporated in the earlier 500 models, which includes an equalizing system. You have a volume knob, a normal passive tone knob, a master volume knob that works with the preamplification system, and the low, mid, high equalizing. There's also two tri-sound, so-called tri-sound switches, which switch the elements to single coil or switch the two coils and the humbuckers out of phase. Oh, it's better to let you hear what all these features sound like. Sounds a bit, it's a humbucking guitar, but it sounds a bit brighter than your typical Les Paul, for instance, when you would compare it with that. It also plays differently from a Les Paul, from a Gibson. Its neck is a bit wider than that of a Stratocaster, but also a bit flatter, but not. It still has a bit more radius than your average Gibson of those years has, which makes funky rhythm parts easier played on this guitar. Your fingers or pick don't get hooked behind the strings as easily as when the strings are really in a flat plane. Well, of course, I can color the sound a bit with my equalizing. Sharp edge on the high. It's got your more jazzy. If I wanted to have a really funky sound, I can switch to single coil, crank up the volume a bit. You can also use the counterphase switch. You get a sound more or less in between the humbucker and the single coil sound. Counterphase, single coil, humbucking. I don't use the counterphase switches that much. They're kind of in between. They're not humbucking and not single coil. I prefer either one. Either of both. Okay, let's dial in some subtle distortion. Can use this guitar quite well as a rock guitar. This is where the master volume comes in handy. had to switch to a solo in between, I could dial in a bit more distortion. Here it has a really long sustain, which is nice. But you can also tell it's a bit of a thick sound. It's not as transparent as, for instance, my Gibson SG, which you can hear in my other video. When I really want your kind of classic rock accompaniment, I prefer that guitar. But when I want a really fluently sounding solo, lead solo, I like this guitar, especially with the heavily overdriven sound. It's really very easy to play, very fluent on this guitar. It's the sound, but it's also the playability of this guitar. It's really one of the easiest playing guitars I've ever had on my hands. I could make the action even a bit lower, but then the sound goes a bit dead. So I prefer to leave it like this, but it's really very, very easy playing guitar. Well, there you have it. It's a very versatile guitar. Rock, funk, single coil, humbucking. Extremely good quality, build quality, and yeah, I'll never sell it because it was the very first guitar I ever had, as I told you, and it's the one I learned everything on. And no matter how valuable they will get, well, perhaps if I get homeless, then I would sell it, but unless that happens, it will be mine forever. Thank you for listening.